Bobby Pinero, who ran finance at Intercom for like 8 years, is building one of the tools he wished he had. And he was just like very sharp. Or, saw Intercom from, I don't know, 20 people or something to like hundreds. So I'm pretty excited about that one.
This is Funded, a show where founders who raised millions in venture capital share the gritty side of what it actually took to get that money in the bank. I'm Jason Ye. Not too long ago, I was trying to get my ideas funded. And back in the day, I was a VC listening to founders pitch me for money. If you paid attention to the clip that I played at the beginning of the episode, you might recognize that voice. It was our Season 2 guest, Christina Cassiopo, founder of Vanta, and she was identifying Bobby Pinero, today's guest, as the founder that she was most excited about coming up, long before he had raised any rounds of venture capital. Since then, I've been watching Bobby from afar. Fast track to now, and we get to talk to him about closing his Series A round from one of the biggest venture firms in the game, Andreessen Horowitz. This isn't to say the road has been easy, though. When Bobby was raising his first round for Equals, the next generation spreadsheet company he always dreamed of building, he was told by countless VCs that he would never be able to pull it off. But, as it turns out, they were wrong.
I think as a kid, I was, pretty nervous and pretty scared and pretty kind of timid. And I always had this like really intense focus on whatever it was that I was doing at that point in time. So I always played a lot of sports growing up, a lot of baseball, a lot of soccer, a lot of swimming. When I got to be a little bit older, I saved up. I was hell bent on buying a computer. It's the number one thing I wanted when I was, 13, 14 years old. I worked in my mom's office doing like random little accounting tasks. She would make me fill out like random journal entries or just do like manual tedious work. And I remember I bought this, like it was like a Gateway, if you remember Gateways. And it was just, for me, it was like when I got something in my head, I was hell bent on it. There was also just a part of me that, and I've had to kind of outgrow this over the years, and it's still something I work on. It's just timid, shy, afraid.
So you would say that you're a hard worker and you have that entrepreneurial spirit, but on the other side, I guess what you're describing is introversion. Like, how would you describe your sort of natural personality?
Yeah, I think I kind of, one of the things I worked on a lot on myself is just feeling like I like belong and feeling like I'm doing what I, like all the things that I've kind of achieved and the things that I've worked towards are things that I'm like worthy of. And for a long time, I guess I've kind of felt not that way. And so that like knocks on your confidence. It makes you afraid. And so, tying this into like ultimately raising money, right? Like I remember there was when I raised the last round with Andreessen, one of the kind of scariest moments of it was going into the partner pitch of it. And I remember for like days before I was like, I don't like, should I be here? Like, this is crazy.
You're kind of teasing what we definitely want to dive into. And this background, given your like pristine resume, is not what I would have expected, but it is a conversation I think it would be super helpful to hear about. So let's rewind a little bit before we get into the exciting round that you just raised. But it seems like you have this sort of dual track of being someone who is an achiever, right? Like in athletics and then later in academics. And we can talk a little bit about your professional career, but you have balanced this feeling of, I guess, imposter syndrome. Is that something that you would use to describe it? Yeah. I mean, and I can relate to that. So maybe tell me a little bit more about the evolution of you and getting into your professional life. Where'd you end up going to school? Did you play sports? Like, what did you study?
Yeah, so I went to, I was fortunate enough to go to Stanford for college. And I did play sports. I rode crew at Stanford. And I'd never rode crew before I got to Stanford. I actually walked onto the team there. I always swam. Again, this is kind of when I get something in my head, I'm hell bent on doing it. And so I decided, I remember seeing an advertisement for the crew team, and there were 2 spots left on the team to make it, and a bunch of people were trying out. And I was like, I remember at one point, first it was like, no way, I don't have any chance. There's people here that are bigger, faster, stronger than I am. And then at one point I remember, it was probably a few weeks into going to practices, and I just remember sitting there and being like, there's no reason why any single one of these other people can beat me. If I train harder, if I spend more time, if I commit to this, there's absolutely no reason why anybody should be able to, why I shouldn't be the one to make it. And so once I had that idea in my head, that was it. Wasn't
Wow.
going to let anybody outwork me. Um, and then at Stanford, you know, the main thing that kind of really changed my perspective, the trajectory of my career, was a class I took by Steve Blank. He wrote The 4 Steps to Epiphany, and the class was called Engineering Entrepreneurship. It was by far the best class I've taken in all of my academic career, certainly at Stanford. And the idea behind the class was you had 10 weeks to start a company. So you spent the first 3 weeks kind of identifying a problem, and you had to go interview people. You had to talk to real people, out in industry, and try to hone down on what was a problem that you could go solve. And then you spent the next 5-6 weeks actually kind of scoping out what a solution to that would look like with their feedback, iterating with them, determining whether they would pay for something like this.
Wow.
And then you spent the last week or two pitching it to real VCs and getting feedback. And that was it. I was hooked after that. And so everything in my career up until now has been kind of leading me to the point of starting my own company.
Amazing. But so you had that experience and exposure to like the idea of starting your own company back in undergrad, but it took you some time to actually decide to launch your own startup, or have you done other things before Equals that was your own company? Can we talk a little
No,
bit
it
about that?
took me 10 years to get there. I knew that ultimately I wanted to get there, but I don't think I had the confidence to be able to do it. I also didn't know that I didn't have an idea or something that I was like absolutely hell bent on. It goes
Yeah.
back to kind of like that one track mind for me. There wasn't something that had taken me over and kind of all consumed me. But I kind of treated my career as this progression, and this is in hindsight in some ways, but like it is this progression to getting me to the point at which I could start Equals.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Would love to hear a little bit about this trigger point around your career. You were a rising star, as Christina said, at Intercom. You built that finance team, huge company. What was the thing that made you decide to step away from like a great career, or something that you could have kept going on, to starting from zero and starting your own company? Was there a moment that you remember?
Um, there were a couple moments. I'd say towards the last couple of years. So I was at Intercom for 8 years. I joined when it was 20 people left, and it was almost 700 people by the time I left. And I'd say probably for like the last year or two, I knew that it wasn't the right fit for me anymore. Just a big company, and I'm an early stage person. Like I really love the building from scratch, the moving really quickly, the working with a tremendous amount of urgency. And you get to a 600 person, 700 person company, and it's all of a sudden you're having meetings to pre-wire before the meeting, and it's like, let's all get into the meeting so that nobody's surprised. And I'm like, well, if everybody knows what's going to be happening in this meeting, why are we having the meeting? And so I just like there's a little bit of just how I'm wired, that I was kind of like, this size of company and this stage just really isn't as exciting to me.
Yeah.
But then there was another moment where, and it's funny you play this recording from Christina, because part of the story here is I actually almost ended up joining Vanta after I left Intercom, and that's how Christina and I got to know each other.
Oh, wow.
And for me, I was deciding whether or not I was going to go start my own company, or go and do the kind of first finance hire and build a company again. And I just remember like thinking through like, am I ready to do this first finance hire thing again? And there was just this like instinctual kind of like, yes, I could do it. It'd be interesting. I'm sure I'd learn all sorts of new things that I didn't learn from Intercom. Um, but it was kind of, it wasn't like that hell yes. It wasn't that like overwhelmingly like that energy just running through me. And then when it was, hey, let's go start equals, it was like all my energy came back. It was all this excitement, all this like, hell yes, absolutely. And that was the moment for me. It was like, okay, that's it. That's the path. Even though it's probably a riskier path and all the things, it's harder and, all those fun things.
Yeah.
It was the
No,
energy.
that's amazing. And like, I wasn't sure that this is the path or the topic that we would keep focusing on, but because the idea of confidence is so important when it comes to raising capital, and because you've talked a little bit about this, like eating feeling that you have at different stages of your life and your career, even as it's going in the right direction, which I, like I said before, I can totally relate to. I think I'll keep asking you this question as we talk through different stages of the company. But you're having conversations with an impressive founder that's already building a great company. You have that option. You don't have the excitement that you do when you start thinking about your own thing. But as you jump into it, there is this moment where you're like, even at the angel round, you're like, I'm going to have to start putting myself out there and asking people to give me money. And so this first pass I want to talk about, in different interviews, I might skip over this, but kind of want to touch on each one and see what that activation energy was for you to overcome some of the anxieties that you had. But you raised an angel round that is not reported on Crunchbase. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, Christina was one of those angels. Do you remember the feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to start asking people to trust me?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, our angel round was connected to our seed round. So we did actually both of them at the exact
You
same
did.
time.
Okay.
And then it wasn't so much as, hey, well, let me say it this way. The, oh my God, people need to trust me happened more when the money landed
Yeah,
than like
right.
I was like, oh my God, all this money landed in our bank account. Holy shit, people now need to trust me. People trust me with this. And
Yeah. Now I need to
um,
do something with it, right?
now I need to do something. I mean, we raised a lot of money before we'd hired a team. We built much of a product. And so there was a lot of holy shit. Now, we got to deliver on what we promised.
Yeah.
But going in, one of the things that I'm fortunate in in going out to raise money was, I picked, and this is why it took me 10 years to get to the point of starting my own company and, getting to this level of confidence was I was raising to build a product in a space for a buyer that I know super well. I've lived the problems. I've done the job. I know how to talk to them. I know how to get in front of them. I know how to write blog posts that resonate with them because I've done it. And so for me, the thing that gave me confidence going into the seed round was like, I know this is the thing that I wish had existed for myself. And so, that didn't mean I still did go and talk to hundreds of people similar to me in similar companies and similar roles and
Hmm.
kind of vet the idea and make sure that it wasn't just me off in the silo wishing that this had existed. But that's where the confidence came from like
Yeah.
doing that actual decade plus of work and being in the trenches.
Yeah. And I think this is a really important part to highlight for you because, like, if you go look up your fundraising on Crunchbase, it's like $6.6 million led by Kraft Ventures and David Sachs, all like huge brands. Christina Cassiopo, I think the founder of a couple other huge startups invested in you. And the thought can be like, look at Bobby, like Stanford grad, whatever, can just like stumble out the door and raise $6 million plus, in his first round of financing ever. And there be like a bit of, like God, like it was just so easy for him. And, he didn't even have to try. He didn't even have like a real product at the time. But the reality is you spent 10 years building two things. One, your deep expertise in a space. Like you said, the customer, the problem space, how to market to them, their psychology. That's not easy to get. But then two, your network, right? The network of people that have seen you execute from a 20-person company all the way to a 700-person company, the network of people that trust you for other reasons. And all those things lead to an amazing seed round, that you probably didn't have much, if any, traction. But like, it's something that I repeat a lot is the rounds that look like they went the fastest probably took the longest time to prepare for. And in your case, 10 years of a career before you decided to pull the trigger. Right. So, I
That's
loved
exactly.
hearing about that. Yeah.
I mean, for me, so much of I got to know David, and I got to know a lot of the craft team from my Intercom days. I got to know Christina Shen, who ultimately led our Series A. I got to know her because she was at Bessemer while I was at Intercom. And so a lot of this is, when folks ask me for, well, my journey on being able to raise money and get kind of plugged into the venture community started and was a lot of just my Intercom days. It was spending
Yeah.
time there and raising money there and being in board meetings and building a reputation as somebody who's excellent at what they do.
Yeah.
And that enabled a lot of these venture meetings for equals.
Yeah. Um, the Yeah, so I'll just underline one other thing too is that if someone wants to recreate what you did for your seed round, they have to think about, well, what did Bobby do over 10 years? And how much time do I have to like short circuit that? I mean, that's kind of how you have to think about it. If you want to, I imagine you built a lot of relationships sort of through osmosis or just through the normal course of day to day. You weren't like, oh my God, I need to grind to like meet this VC and spend time with this VC so that when I do raise the money, right? So you did it over 10 years. The challenge for anyone that is coming in cold and deciding that they want to do something like you did is to think and deconstruct, well, what did Bobby actually have? And how much of that can I get done in a shorter amount of time? Very challenging. So the fun thing to talk about now, which is the last round you raised, you announced, I think it was like a $16 million round. Is that right?
That's right.
Led by Andreessen Horowitz. Very exciting. Congrats, by the way. um, Here's where I think it's really interesting. I've interviewed a lot of founders who have an incredible background and spent many years building their reputation, and they cash those chips in much like you did to raise your seed round. But a lot of that kind of is no longer applicable when you go out to raise a Series A. For sure, your reputation matters. For sure, having some sort of level of comfort. But what is a little bit scary, and this is what we're going to talk about, is now shifting to a round of financing that has a lot more to do with what you've done to date. So I wonder if we could talk a little bit about this. The the dates in Crunchbase are a little bit harder to align exactly how much timing you had between, when money hit the bank and how much time you had to actually build your company. Um, but as much as you can share, I'd love to hear you set the stage for when you realized that you wanted to go out and raise a Series A.
Yeah. So our story is we raised the seed. It was probably early 2021,
Mm-hmm.
April, May. That was when we really started equals. And then we spent about a year heads down. We built a small team. It was probably about 8, 10 people by the end of that year to get to our first version of equals out in the world. So we spent a year heads down. I mean, I don't write code. I spent a lot of time specking product, dreaming up things that we ultimately did build. And then I spent a lot of time priming the market, so writing and kind of getting folks excited about what we were. We weren't sharing what we were building quite yet, but at least starting to get signups and starting to get in front of people. So we spent a year heads down building the product. We put our first sneak peek of equals out in April of 2022, and then we launched properly in June of 2022. And we just got, I mean, it was kind of lightning in a bottle. We really kind of hit on something that was people were excited about. The demo video that we put out really kind of took off. And we had just this really, really, really exciting, even though they were smallish numbers, momentum over the course of the first 4 or 5 months that we were out in the world. And I remember uh, it was, as these things go, it was just just around the same time that the SaaS market was melting down. The market in general was melting down, but all of the fundraising market, I mean, I remember getting calls from folks at Kraft being like, how much runway do we have? We need to batten down the hatches. This is, it's over. Like, nobody's raising any money at all. And I'm sitting there like, hold on, we got something really exciting. We got really exciting momentum. I kind of think we should go out and test. Even though we're early, we should start to put some feelers out. And we can talk about fundraising strategies. Like, I tend to be more of when you're fundraising, and it's like you're running a full process and you're doing the whole thing, and you don't kind of dip your toes in the water. You like commit to it and go.
Totally.
In this case, we put a couple feelers out, and we started to get a little bit of people starting to bite, and then it was go time. And then it was like, okay, now we're going to start a whole process, and we're going to start pulling people in, and we're going to, and so we ended up closing the Series A. I think it was October 2022, so just a handful of months after we launched. Early for a Series A, definitely, both from a kind of traction, revenue, and time in market perspective. But so much of raising money is being able to capture momentum, tell a really compelling story, help people extrapolate where you're going as opposed to just kind of what you've done.
Even in the face of so much rejection from investors, Bobby still strongly believed in what he was doing. And when you strongly believe in what you're doing, it becomes much harder for naysayers to hold you back. When we return, Bobby talks about stepping through self-doubt and stepping on the gas for his Series A. Like many of you, my last venture-backed startup was a SaaS business. In that company early on, we had the opportunity to sell into a large enterprise, but ran into some walls when they asked us if we were SOC 2 certified. Not only were we not certified, we also found out that it would take our small team a ton of time to get that done, and so we ended up abandoning the deal. If you haven't run into a situation like that where a potential customer or investor is asking if you're SOC 2, HIPAA, GDPR, or ISO 27001 certified, you probably will soon. But unlike me, you could use a company called Vanta to help. Vanta helps automate up to 90% of the compliance work, getting you audit ready in weeks rather than months, and eliminating up to 85% of the costs. Not only that, but Vanta can start small with you and scale up as you grow, helping you land bigger deals and earn customer trust. The best part is, Vanta is offering funded listeners $1,000 off for going to vanta.com/funded. That's VANTA.com/funded for $1,000 off your service. Check it out. Can you share, I mean, you don't have to get very specific, but can you share how much runway you had when you kind of started lightly dipping your toes in the water?
Yeah, 18 months.
You still had 18 months.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a proponent of raising when you don't have to raise.
Sure.
And I tried, right now when we're planning our Series B, I'm targeting 18 months as the time that's when we're going out to raise Series B. And we did the same thing at Intercom. It was always like, I never ran us tighter than 12 months, and I was horrendously uncomfortable. 18 months, and I'm
you're a finance guy, right? That's what you're supposed to do. No, this is interesting. I mean, so tell me a little bit about this, because you're right. You should always raise when you don't have to. But the reality is you only had 4 months of traction, right? So whenever I help people think about when they should fundraise, one of the things that I always help founders kind of distance themselves from is this idea that they're like, well, if we raise a month later, we're going to have 10% more X, 10% more users, 10% more revenue. Like, and so like it will be better. And I'm always like, especially at the earlier stages, even as you go later, it's like, it's not so granular the way a VC thinks about like if you are this far along versus an inch further versus, a foot further. It's always to me, this idea is like, if you wait another 3 months, will the narrative change? Like, will the ability to tell a bigger story change and you're like the confidence that you do that with? Or is it just going to be like 2 or 3 more months of incremental growth? When you go and decide to raise 18 months in advance, you're looking at what you could do in the next, call it 12 months, because a lot of people say 6 months is maybe what you budget for. And there should probably be like significant things you can do, inflection points, launches, etc. So at this point, when you went 4 months after launching, like what was your thought process? Was it just the idea of like, in my head, I don't want to raise when I have less than, 18 months of runway, or was there kind of another analysis for you?
No, for us, it really came down to what can we do if we put more money on the balance sheet. And
Mm,
so we had a lot of confidence in the direction, the momentum that we built up over 4 or 5 months. I felt very confident that should we need to go raise again in 6 months from now, if this process failed, that in 6 months from now we'd be able to go and raise an exciting round. Uh, but for me, the main thing that kind of drove it was, wow, if we can actually put some money on the balance sheet right now. So like Equals is a really hard product to build.
yeah.
Um, I can't tell you how many in our seed process, how many VCs told us we were absolutely out of our mind. You know how many thousands of engineers Google has building Sheets? You know how many thousands of engineers Microsoft has building Excel? You'll never even come close. You know how many people have tried to build a spreadsheet? You'll never come close. And for us, the calculus was we can actually accept, like we know what we need to build. We knew from day one, we put together this really comprehensive roadmap of every single little feature, everything, and it's allowed us to move really, really fast. And we knew what we needed. We knew what we needed to build, and just that we were under resourced to be able to go do that. And so for us, it was how do we build this faster? How do we
Yeah.
take this to market faster? Let's put more money on the balance sheet to do that.
I love that. I mean, the way you're describing even going into this in your company is like filled with confidence, right? You have this strong belief in what you're doing. And yet it seems like, I mean, everyone is going to face rejection when fundraising, and that starts eating at your own like inner voice. And somebody's in there is going to start talking about like what it means to fail. Um, Tell me a little bit about dipping your toes in the water of like seeing if there is interest, um, and how much like hesitation you had around that. Like, when did the voice start entering in your mind? The one that started talking to you as you were going to your final partner meetings at Andreessen.
So I think there's maybe two separate things here, but I think the doubt for me came more from a place of like going into the partner meeting at Andreessen. It was just like, this is like one of the absolute best VCs in the world. I'm going in to raise, like, do I belong here? Am I like crazy? Like, what? I'm a finance guy, and like, I just, am I a founder? And like, is this really? And the thing that shifted for me in the kind of couple of days preceding that meeting was um, just really reflecting on. I was like, no, this is actually what I've been working on. This is what I've been working towards for the past like 10 years, is to get me to this point. And this is like, I belong here, and this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And that gave me the confidence to then walk in that room and be, tell the best equal story that I could.
Yeah.
Um, and then, more tactically on, dipping kind of your toe in the market and trying, testing whether or not there's interest for where you're at, the traction you have, the product, the vision. Um, the main consideration you have there is kind of, um, again, I'm kind of a big proponent of like, when you raise and you go for
Yeah.
it and you commit yourself and you're all in, and so testing the water is kind of like this, like dangerous place to be, because you don't really want to indicate to raising money is a game. You don't want to
Yep.
indicate to investors that you're like actually raising, because if you don't raise, then it kind of looks like this black mark on the company. It's like, oh, they tried to raise, but they didn't raise, and
Yep.
why didn't they raise? And oh, VCs, we're all humans, right? And humans are kind of, we all look to each other for signals. And so if somebody else passed on a deal, like that makes another investor more likely to pass on the deal. And so just want to kind of be careful. And so
Yeah.
that was really the downside consideration for us as we started to think about dipping our toe in the water. But you can do that in a way that's kind of delicate, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
With that strategy, so like I know how I would run that strategy, but I wonder if you did it too. Like there is something about testing the waters and seeing if something bites, so that if no one's biting, you can just be like, "Yep, I'm going to pull back. Like that wasn't actually a raise." But in order to do what you did, and you did it well, it sounds like, is like you started getting some interest and then you wanted to surround that interest with a process quickly. Had you done any of your prep work for that process so that if the interest did come in, you would be able to like actually get stuff together? You would have your materials, you would have introductions ready to go. Or was it kind of like flying by the seat of your pants and you're like, oh my God, now we need to go find all of our introductions?
No,
Yeah.
not at all. We had the deck ready. We have two decks. We have a pitch deck, data deck. We had a list of all the investors that we wanted to talk to. Should things like the dip our toe in the water was okay. If it goes, then here's exactly what we do. And it's a list of 50 investors,
Yeah.
everybody that's going to introduce us, when they're going to introduce us, all the decks ready, my pitch nailed. That takes me a week or two to like practice the pitch and prepare all the questions, think through how I'm going to respond to every single question, get all our data in the right place. So all of that was ready to go, which is
Yeah.
what makes these things hard. It's like dipping
It's
your
a
toe
lot
in
of
the
work.
water. It's an expensive exercise, and it's
Right. It pulls you away. Like,
yeah.
it's funny. I asked you that question kind of leading the witness. I knew the answer for a couple reasons. One, like you're a finance guy, and finance guys don't leave anything up to chance. They know exactly how these things fit. And then two, like successful fundraisers look the same. And that's kind of the one of the messages that we put out there, that I try to put out there, is like pulling back the curtains, is like this could like look like, pristine down the middle, like personality that just jumped in and then raised the money because of his network and then went out there and then like, dipped his toes in the water. And then, oh my God, like $16 million just fell in my lap. But it's like, in order to do that well, you have to take what's given to you and take your advantage and then like put in the hard work to make sure this all happens, right? Like you have to have all that ready, and loved hearing you say like, no. Like we put in a ton of work, even in the dipping your toes strategy, and 2 weeks of practice. And like, we were ready to go. And so everyone has to understand that, you need to be ready to go. um, so one more thing that I just wanted to kind of pick apart here. One of the things that I loved was that you kind of open sourced / shared a little bit of your strategy for Series A and some of the things that you've sort of developed in terms of your process for fundraising, especially as data becomes a bigger part of the fundraising story. Is this stuff that you have sort of pieced together on your own, or is your network of founders who have raised money in your venture capitalists, are they coaching you around this? Tell us a little bit about this, and you can, if you want to like tease a little bit about that Twitter thread that you put out there, that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my recommendation on fundraising processes is, so I actually wrote a blog post on this too. I go a little bit counter to most other fundraising processes in that I almost, and we did this at Intercom, and I've done this at Equals, like never share a raw data dump. Like investors will always ask you, give me like a model in Excel, give me all of your customers, give me all of the transactions of every customer. And I'm almost always, the answer to that is no. And, but you have to, if you're going to say no to that, you have to be prepared to, you have to have something else for them, right? Because they want to understand what's going on in your business. And so what I do and we did this at Intercom and with Equals, is you've got your pitch deck, which is your standard kind of, this is what the company is why we exist, this is the traction and momentum that we have. But then I always create something called the data deck. And the data deck is basically the story of the business in numbers. And you try to answer every single question that the investor is going to have about how your business works. And the reason you do this is you actually don't want to learn this the hard way. You share a raw data dump with an investor, you share a model with them, you share all of your cohorts, all of your customers. And guess what? They're going to own the narrative on how your business works. They're going to come back to you with 50 questions. Why is this cohort like this? Why does this? Oh, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And all of a sudden you're on the back foot answering to the investor their questions about your business. You're just in a horrible place doing that. What you want to do is you want to step forward and you want to tell them how your business works. You want to say, this is how our business works. We acquire customers through these channels. These are the unit economics for that. This is the lifetime value of these customers. This is, every cut that the investor would ultimately put together themselves are things that you need to have looked at and prepared for them in advance. And that just lets you own the narrative. And so you come at it, you're not answering questions, you're explaining to them how the business works. And so you're just in such a fundamentally different position when you're raising and you're doing that than if you're answering questions and trying to just send them stuff and they're doing analysis and send you questions back.
Yeah. There was something that you had put in one of your writings that you're kind of dancing around here, which is essentially like owning the narrative for your data and like applying your story, the story that you want them to understand about Equals or your company. I think a lot of people think that you should be putting out a deck or a story or a pitch that is like, choose your own adventure. It's like, if you like this, then I want to make sure I put some data in here about this or a line or two about the way we do this. But if you're more like this, we'll also talk a little bit about this in case they're interested. And that can be like one of the most damaging ways to try to get an investor excited, is because it's all like kind of diluted down and not a really, really strong point of view. I think people are afraid that if you put your own narrative onto your data or in your deck, it might not resonate with the investor that you're talking to. And that means rejection. But like what you want is that, like you need
That's a
that
good
strong
thing.
point of view. Yeah, exactly. You want to
Yeah.
lean in, like you were talking about, take a step forward and be very bold with what you say, whether in words or numbers.
But that's also, that goes back to like how you run your business too, right? Like you should know the direction that you want to take things in, and what is the strategy that you're going to apply, and what is the narrative on your business, and what are the top 3 things that you need to nail when you raise this money.
Yeah.
And if you own that, if you know that, then tell that story. And if those are things that you really believe, then the no's are thank you. Like,
Yeah.
thank you, you're not aligned to this. And so I'm not going to have to spend the next 2 years in board meetings arguing with you about whether or not this is the right strategy or the wrong strategy.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm going to bring on somebody who's aligned to this, who sees it the same way so many investors don't see it the same way you do. And that's okay. That's okay. They don't get it. And, but you want the ones that get it, the ones that are aligned with you. And so if you can get really clear on what it is for you, then you'll find the people who are bought into that.
So it's funny you say right now we were just talking about this idea that so many investors will not be aligned with you. You teased out a moment of like not learning the hard way on certain things, and throughout this conversation, I think there's been a lot of great moments where pull back the curtain and be like, wasn't all easy, lots of work, whatever. You did raise $16 million plus from Andreessen Horowitz, $6 million plus from Kraft and other amazing investors. That doesn't mean that every single time that you went out, people were like, yes, Bobby. You talked about this idea of like, how crazy is it to say that you're going to compete with Microsoft in Excel and Google with Sheets? So I imagine there were some not very fun moments along the way. I wonder if there are any specific interactions, and of course you don't have to name names, but like, what are some of the crappiest moments, of your fundraising journey, maybe especially in this last one?
Um, I mean, I remember sending out the pitch deck to an investor and then just no. So, okay, all right, cool.
I guess, that was kind of nice, not wasting your time, but man, that
Like
is a little
how?
bit of an ego hit.
Yeah, I think it was no, and then how is this different from Airtable? Question mark. And I was like, okay, fine, that's okay. And then I think the ones that kind of sting the most are, or the ones that I think you need to be most careful about are ones where they get, folks get really deep with you, and then they come back and they're like, hey, look, and it's okay. Not everybody's going to have conviction about the idea. They say, hey, look, I have a fundamental disbelief in this. So like one very well-known prominent fund didn't believe that our core differentiator, pulling data, having a spreadsheet that's connected to live data, was enough. Was enough for people to be excited about, was enough for people to move use cases over out of Excel and Sheets. And that one probably stung the most, because it was like, that makes you like, is it enough?
Oh yeah, that's when you start questioning. Yeah.
Yeah, you start to like, oh shoot. But look, like it comes back to your own conviction and your own belief, and it's really what you're looking for, like one or two people to like believe in you, and if you believe in the idea, and then that's it. Go for it.
Yeah. The flip side of that question, that I love having founders relive is, do you remember when you got the word from Andreessen? Who was the lead, by the way?
Christina Shen.
Christina, yeah. Do you remember when you got the note or the word or the call that they would be, leading you around? What did that feel like, and where were you?
I was in my room. I was on a call late at night, and Christina was like, "Look, I want to do this deal." And then you get. You're just so excited. You've been in the trenches for. I mean, at that point, I'd been talking to her daily for 6 days, 7 days, answering questions. She's talking to our customers. She's digging into the data. We're getting questions from principals on the team. Hey, can you pull us this? Hey, can you pull us this? And so you're like deep in it.
And you had other people passing along the way too, right?
We had other people passing along the way. Hey, it's too early. Hey, we don't, we can't quite get there. Oh, the space is too crowded. All sorts of, all the reasons. Yeah. And then, I remember talking to Christina, and she was like grilling me on some topic. I don't even remember what it was. It was like, asking me a bunch of questions about the direction, the buyer, the persona, use cases, things like that. And then at some point she's just like, look, I want to do this deal. And so you get like really excited. You're like, yes, but you can't show the excitement,
yeah. You're like, that's interesting,
like, oh yeah, that's the like fourth person to tell me that. Of course.
Right. Oh God, there's so much competition for this. We're going to have to negotiate.
Yeah. But then, you are kind of, you're like excited on the inside, but you're kind of also trying to, poker face it a little bit. And, you want to make sure that you are giving yourself optionality to push on price and, get the best terms in the deal, get the things that are important for you. So from there, after that, it was, she wants to do the deal. And then it was the process of kind of negotiating price and terms. And, you want to, one of the things that I always try to do in fundraising processes is you want to just make sure that you want to keep as many of the investors in the same point in the process as possible, so that when you do get that first yes, you have everybody else that's kind of right around the same point, so that they're ready to make decisions. I see a lot of founders kind of, a lot of people were like, oh, let's start with our tier A, then tier B, and then tier C, and we're going to talk to 5 VCs. And then if that doesn't work, we'll talk to these 5 ones. But would actually do yourself a disservice, because then if somebody gets excited, now you've got all these people in mismatched timelines, and you're trying to let one person wait, hold off on one person, but they don't want to wait, and then you're trying to catch other person up, but you're trying to move them too quickly.
Yep.
And so the hard part about raising money is it's like, talk to everyone at the same time as fast as you possibly can and keep them on the same timeline as possible, which means you don't sleep a lot and it's crazy and you're taking a lot of meetings and it's all night, all day.
Yep.
But that's the most effective way to do it.
Before the episode ended, I asked Bobby if he had any advice for founders going out to raise. Here's what he had to say.
One of the things that I found really helpful, that I had in both of my fundraising processes, and I've then tried to do for others when they're in fundraising processes, is have a founder texting buddy during your process. Somebody who's raised money, who's not involved in your company, who can just be a sounding board for everything that goes on. And you need to set expectations with them that it's a pretty big commitment up front. But I had texting and the founder of Intercom was my texting buddy in our seed process. And I cannot tell you how valuable that was to me. It was to the level of like, hey, I got this email, I got this text. What do you think about my reply? How should I answer this question? And what happens in these fundraising processes is every VC has their own style and they have their own game, and they're each trying to pull you away from. They're trying to kind of pull you into their web and their way of working and their way of thinking about the company. And you need to have somebody who can kind of remind you of a few things throughout it all. One, that this is your company. You're giving other folks the privilege to buy a chunk of your company, the thing that you're going to work on all day, all night, you're going to obsess about. And so don't let them kind of like play various games with you. And to be confident and stand up and just, push for kind of what you need and what you want. So I find it really helpful to have a texting buddy, but they have to be committed. And, again, it's like you can text them at 10 o'clock at night and then they're going to respond and they're going to be in with you, sending, drafting stuff up and whatnot.
That's a great piece of advice. I mean, a Sherpa, somebody who can help you sort of get out of your own head, because there are a couple of things, right? Like in the process, you have a lot of anxiety, and a third party objective eye that knows kind of what these things look like can give you much clearer advice. And I also think that founders are sometimes too close to their business to kind of, be as objective and sort of straightforward as they need to be in a lot of situations. And, you're a baseball guy, and sometimes I throw out these analogies. I'm a big sports guy. I used to work for Major League Baseball, actually. But I always say, like, fundraising is this thing where it's like, it's not supposed to be adversarial or competitive, right? But it kind of is. And the analogy is that you have one side, which is essentially playing in the major leagues and doing the same thing 10 times a day, 52 weeks a year, practicing and practicing and practicing. It would be like a major league pitcher, right? And then some person who's like, I read Bobby Pinero's blog post about fundraising, about hitting a fastball from a major league pitcher. I think I could do this. Yeah. He said, rotate his hips, and stepping up, you do it once every 2 years, and you go in there expecting to be great on your own. And it's like, you got to make it a team-based sport. You got to have support. You got to practice. You got to do as much as you can, because in those situations, even someone like you are kind of at a disadvantage. You just don't have as much data. You don't have as many reps. And it's a tough thing. So yeah, I love that advice. That was my conversation with Bobby Pinero, founder and CEO of Equals, the next generation spreadsheet taking the enterprise world by storm. And let this be a reminder to you, if you're going to fundraise, go all in. When we come back, I'm interested in hearing my producer Paige's thoughts on Bobby and his journey to closing his Series A. Okay, so I've actually struggled with focus my entire life, which might be surprising to some people because I got good grades, went to good schools, got good jobs. But really, I was able to get that far in spite of myself. It's been a struggle all my life, and that struggle really came to a head once I became an entrepreneur. At that point, there was too much going on. I couldn't overpower my lack of focus. So I tried a bunch of things, planning apps, coaching, but nothing really made a dent. And then I started hearing about this special productivity drink, Magic Mind, and was super skeptical. Honestly, it wasn't until a friend gifted me some that I became a believer. When you take a little bit of this stuff, it's hard to describe, but there's like this feeling of focus that just washes over you, where all of the things that normally distract you no longer do. And honestly, it's been a game changer for me. So I'm really excited because Magic Mind is sponsoring this podcast and offering up to 50% off your subscription if you sign up within 10 days of this airing. All you have to do is go to magicmind.co/funded or use funded as your promo code when you're checking out. Hope you guys try it out and that you like it as much as I do.
Hello, Jason.
Hey, Paige, how's it going?
I'm not sure why that was so funny, but we're going to roll with it. I just listened in on your conversation with Bobby, and right off the bat, I just want to mention I've been working alongside founders for a while now. I've learned a lot about the fundraising process, a little bit about do's and don'ts, and I was very inspired, honestly, by how much he knew about the fundraising conversation and about running a process. I was just very impressed. So I don't know if you have any thoughts around that, but he just seemed so well orchestrated around how to run a good fundraising process.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I wish I had asked him more questions about that because I picked up on it as well. He doesn't have tons of fundraising experience and he wasn't an investor, but he definitely was on the elite end. My guesses are a couple things. One, I think he's just very, very smart. I think he's very smart and he's probably thought about this at a deep level and tried to deconstruct it himself. He probably approaches it like any other problem that he tackles. He kind of understands what needs to get accomplished, who the stakeholders are, and how to influence them. So I imagine a lot of that comes from there. And then, he was part of Intercom really early on. They raised a ton of money, and because he was running finance there, he was probably at least arm's length associated with the fundraise. So at least he's seen some of those and how the founders of Intercom ran fundraisers. So he probably went to school on that. And then I don't want to discount the fact that he's got a great network, and whether it was because of the stuff that he did at Intercom and the people he knew there, or if you'll remember, and we led off with this, Christina Cassiopa, who is the founder of Vanta and one of his angel investors who raised a ton of money and went through YC. She and the other people in his network who have been through fundraisers, I'm sure, were sources of information for him. So he had a lot of ways to get great at this. It also doesn't discount the fact that even with all those advantages, if you will, to learning about fundraising, it's still very impressive of what he's been able to do and set up and execute. But that would be my guess on why he's especially good at this.
Yeah, he was in good hands, but he also, at the end of the day, it's up to you to execute. So kudos to him for, I don't know, I just think he nailed it. But I was curious about something. When in the beginning of the episode, he was talking about how he had his first round, which was an angel round. And then he ended up connecting that round to a seed round. And I'm just wondering, I don't know, I'm honestly just confused around what causes you to do that. Is it like out of necessity? Is it normal to do that? Just some of the facts behind how that happens.
Yeah. So that's a strategy that I talk a lot about. So I've written about this of building an angel army. I imagine he did something similar, but it usually plays out like this. It's like, we know that we can get something done in the company if we just have a little bit of capital. If we just have a little bit more capital in the company, we could move a little bit faster, execute on a couple things. Yeah. And especially at the earliest stages when you raise money from angels, like that fundraise can sort of put you on the radar for more formal investors, more institutional investors, like people that are trying to invest at the pre-seed level. And a lot of times I'll tell people, you can go out and raise from angels, but raising from angels is going to add a bunch of credibility to what you're doing. And even if they're tiny, tiny checks, like $5,000 from the founder of, I don't know, Adamant, or $5,000 from the founder of Vanta, I'm not sure how much they invested, but even those small amounts all of a sudden become this kind of credibility marker that someone as interesting as Christina Cassiopo would invest in you. And if more and more people hear that good people are investing in you at the angel level, it can cause a lot of investors to start leaning in and wanting to learn more. And it's that momentum that everyone's looking for in any fundraise, whether it's at the seed, Series A, IPO, like momentum is everything. And so what Bobby was able to do and other people should do is if they're able to generate momentum with these smaller angels, there is an ability to look around and be like, oh my gosh, there are now VCs looking at my deal and interested in meeting me. I might as well use this momentum to then kick off the full fundraise. And it's funny that you pointed that out. Like, he did the same thing in a different way in this Series A as he was testing out the market and waiting for people to start leaning in. And once he felt the momentum, he was like, okay, like now it's time to surround it with the full process and go.
I love it. I love his senses around this. I feel like he's very good at tuning into when he should start executing on the process. And obviously it's working for him. But yeah, that does make a lot more sense. So it's basically an angel round becomes a seed round when there's so much momentum being built from angel investors that investors want to get in on it. Is that basically a good summation?
That's right. Like the next round of investors see the people that are interested now and use that as indication that this might be a good time to try to invest anyways.
Okay. All right. I think that makes sense. Something else that I wanted to bring up that I think you'll think is hilarious, because something that Bobby said, which stood out to me, was that he's a big component, or he stands behind raising when you don't need to. Yeah. And I am pretty sure that this is something that you oppose or go against. So I'm curious, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm curious on your thoughts around. So Bobby basically would prepare and start fundraising way ahead of time. Like, he would still have a decent amount of runway left, and he would decide to go out there and, start working on his process. Do you like that? Do you not? I don't know. It's working for him, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
No, I'm actually a big supporter, and maybe you're thrown off because I just describe it differently. If someone thinks that they're going to run out of capital in a year, a lot of people will wait until it's 3 months away from running out of capital to start preparing to fundraise. Yeah. I would rather people fundraise well in advance, like start to prepare to fundraise a year in advance so that they have the flexibility and comfort level to go fundraise with a lot of momentum and preparation behind their backs. And at that time, because you have a year of runway, it means you don't need to fundraise, right? Yeah. Technically wouldn't have to fundraise. So I think he just describes it differently. Overall, fundraising where you have a gun to your head because you're about to run out of capital means that you just don't have a lot of options. And that desperation can be picked up by VCs a mile away. And so you want to go into a fundraise where when people like look at the opportunity and they're like, well, I'm not sure I want to invest. You're like, I don't really care. Like, I don't need you. Like, I don't need this money now. I just want to do it because there's a big opportunity. And I think if you have the opportunity / flexibility in your runway, you absolutely should be thinking about what it means to fundraise well ahead of your cash out date.
Yeah. And then I see where I got confused now. I think I got mixed up in you telling founders, like, at some of your workshops, you've said, I think majority of you in here might not have to raise venture capital. You're speaking about before, like recognizing if your business actually needs to raise money or not,
At
where he
all.
was
That's right.
talking about knowing he's a business that needs to raise money and getting ahead of the process on that. Am I?
That's 100%, Chris.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I mixed up then. Okay.
And the other thing I'd say is when someone is thinking about raising capital, a lot of times, this is just like, it reminds me of another lesson I tell people, is a lot of people will make the mistake of let's say they're a year out from a fundraise and they're like, well, every day that I generate like 1% more revenue means that I'm a little bit better. And, if I have 2% more revenue, then maybe I'll have 2% higher of a valuation. And the reality is the decision to make an investment and put a valuation on a company isn't so scientific, that the levers are so granular, like every little incremental amount of improvement is going to change things. That's not how it works. Yeah. And because of that, what I tell founders is you might have a year's runway and you might be making progress over the next few months, but that progress that you make might not actually change the story that you tell to investors. And if that's the case, then the months from now till the next 3, 4, or 5 months where the numbers might lightly change, but the story doesn't actually improve your ability to fundraise. Actually, all it does is reduce your runway, which if that's the case, then you should just go out now. So you go fundraise with the exact same story, just more runway, more flexibility, and more comfort in the way you actually execute things. So it all adds up to a lot of the things Bobby does, which is start prepping early and kick off the fundraise when he's able to build momentum super early on.
Yeah, I also feel like it helps you, the further out you plan, it helps you not feel so desperate to investors because you know you still have time to talk to other people, you still have options. Whereas a lot of people that, like you're saying, wait till the last 3 months, of course, they might reek of desperation because in a way they are. So like getting ahead of that is very good. So I give him credit. That seems like the way to do it. If you're going to go out there, obviously, maybe it's not always ideal and maybe it doesn't always work out that way, but
and I will say, like, a lot of this is easier said than done.
Yeah.
And when we talk about any of these scenarios, I'm always like painting the perfect picture of the perfect situation. Well, it would be like this and that. And there are always...
Which never happens.
Yeah, it never happens except if you're named Bobby Pinero. But otherwise, there are always exceptions. There are always challenges and difficulties that make it, hard to do these things. But we'd always like to share what the perfect scenario is so you can always sprint towards that.
Even in Bobby's case, like, he was on eggshells to the last second. Like, he had the most planned out rate, he had so much knowledge around it, and he's still, like, towards the end, you're waiting for that answer. And I think it goes to show, like, it's always gonna be, what do you say? You always say, like, it's not over till it's actually over, or something like that.
Yeah,
it's so true.
And honestly, even the best run fundraisers, even the best outcome, you read about a $16 million raise led by Andreessen Horowitz with participation from Kraft, like the Equals fundraise was. And if you peel back the layers, he'll tell you a bunch of funds pass. Yeah. A bunch of funds don't believe in you. And especially if you're like pricing aggressively and you're going for something big, there are going to be tons of people that say no. And it almost always at the very end still feels like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure if this is going to happen. So I always like making sure people hear that story. So if they're in the fog of war right now and going through the battle, it's like, I don't want them to be so thrown off by the anxiety they're feeling, because like most fundraisers feel it.
Yeah, that's why I love this podcast. Everyone can use it as encouragement to understand it's not sunshine and rainbows. It's going to be messy, but some of the best fundraisers out there have been a little crazy at the end, and then everything pulls together. It's supposed to be. So I think we'll wrap up there.
Yeah, you're picking up on a lot, Paige. I like the insights that you're seeing and the right questions. But this is definitely this is a great interview for all of us to go to school on. I'm excited we were able to do it.
Yeah, me too. Till next time, Jason.
Thanks, P. If you're looking for more insights, strategies, and support around fundraising, subscribe to our weekly newsletter. It's at fundedpod.com/newsletter. Also, find me on social. I'm at Jayeh, that's Jayyeeh, on almost every platform, so hit me up. I respond to newsletter replies and DMs. This episode was produced by Paige Randall.
Hey guys.
Thanks also to John O'Lee from Adamant.
Hey everyone.
As always, one last thanks to our fantastic sponsor, Vanta, the leading automated security and compliance platform.